Late on the 23rd of February 1991, 10 Special Forces reconnaissance teams of the US 3rd and 5th Special Forces Groups crossed the border into Iraq by helicopter. They are to join Green Beret, Delta Force and British SAS operatives already in Iraq. In just a few hours' time, the ground invasion to liberate Kuwait will begin, and these invisible eyes in the desert will report on Iraqi division movements. Operation Desert Storm has been ongoing for 5 weeks. A 35-nation-strong coalition formed as a response to the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait has been engaged in a massive bombing campaign against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. With an average of 2,500 bombing sorties per day, the command and control structures and logistics lines to Saddam's army in the east have been severely degraded. More recently, the bombing has shifted towards Iraqi troops themselves, aiming to soften them up and weaken their resolve to fight such a superior enemy. Coalition Navy ships have also blasted Iraqi positions near the Kuwaiti coast with naval gunfire. President George H.W. Bush issues a final ultimatum to Saddam Hussein: leave Kuwait by 8 p.m. on the 23rd of February or face a ground invasion. Like the ultimatum preceding the air campaign, this is no bluff, and G-Day, the beginning of the ground invasion, is scheduled to begin at 4 a.m. on the 24th. General Norman Schwarzkopf, Commander-in-Chief of Coalition Forces, arrives at Central Command in Riyadh. Coalition forces are split into 5 corps along the front line. On the west flank, 18 Airborne Corps, made up of 4 divisions. The French Daguet, a light armoured division of tanks, recon and armoured infantry, including 2 regiments of the prestigious and recently battle-experienced French Foreign Legion. The infamous US 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. The 82nd will support the French Daguet as motorised infantry. The 16,000 paratroopers of the 101st will ride into battle with 350 helicopters. The 24th Infantry Division and 3rd Armoured Cavalry Regiment, bringing a combined 333 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles and 333 Abrams main battle tanks. The 2 formations bring an armoured capability to 18 Corps. 7 Corps, in the centre, are the heavy armoured fist of the coalition. The US 1st and 3rd Armoured Divisions and the British 1st Armoured Division are the centrepiece of the battering ram, using Abrams and Challenger tanks. Supplementing the 3 armoured divisions are the US 1st Cavalry and 1st Infantry Divisions, and the 2nd Armoured Cavalry Regiment, with further Abrams and Bradleys, helicopter, engineering and artillery support. 1st Infantry, known as the Big Red One, were the first wave to attack Omaha Beach on D-Day in 1944. 7 Corps will roll across the border with 1,487 main battle tanks, 1,384 infantry fighting vehicles, 242 attack helicopters and 146,000 troops. East of 7 Corps, on the border with Kuwait, is Joint Forces Command North, made up of divisions of Egyptian, Saudi, Kuwaiti and Syrian armour. Marine Central Command comprises the US 1st and 2nd Marine Divisions, armed with the older M60 tanks and a brigade from the 2nd Armoured Division. The east flank is another joint command of mechanised Arab forces from Saudi Arabia, Oman, the UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, Morocco and Senegal. With the Iraqi Air Force neutralised, overwhelming air power can be brought to bear with many hundreds of coalition strike and close air support aircraft, ready to react at a moment's notice. Coalition ground forces number nearly 700,000. The Iraqi military can't boast such firepower. Of the approximately 350,000 Iraqi troops in the region, it is estimated that 140,000 have already deserted, with another 26,000 killed in the ferocious and unhindered bombing leading up to G-Day. The 700,000 coalition troops, with modern tanks and air power, will face roughly 180,000 Iraqis, armed with tanks that mostly date from pre-1980 and with no air power. Even the most modern T-72 tanks have an effective range of just over half that of the Abrams and Challenger tanks they'll be matched against. Saddam has positioned his weakest divisions on the border. His elite Republican Guard divisions are positioned further north, with the Tawakalna division the nearest on the Iraq-Kuwait border. If they're to liberate Kuwait, Coalition armour will have to face the Republican Guard in the desert. The Coalition war plan is as follows. At 4 AM on the 24th of February, G-Day, the left and right flanks will advance into enemy territory. On the right flank, Marine Central Command and Joint Forces Command East will carefully carve entry paths through the dense minefields on the Kuwaiti border and engage the enemy beyond. On the left, the Mobile 18 Corps will blitz north. The 101st Airborne will perform a massive helicopter assault to capture an area 155 miles behind enemy lines, named Objective Cobra, hold it, and build a forward operating base, potentially under fire. Meanwhile, the rest of 18 Corps will advance north by land. The French and 82nd Airborne will capture Objective Rochambeau, another supply route near As Salman, and then As Salman Crossroads and Airfield, so that ground supply trucks can reach the 101st further north. On G+1, the Armoured Fist of 7 Corps will advance across the Saddam Line and move north. On G+2, on reaching Al-Basaya, 7 Corps will wheel right into Kuwait, where they'll face the Republican Guard en masse. The Arab forces on the right flank will have the honour of liberating Kuwait City. At 5:30 AM on the 24th of February, the US Marines on the right flank advance across the border. They're immediately met with Iraqi artillery fire. Because they don't have any forward observers or helicopter support, the shells are being fired wildly at the American line, and no hits are scored. To cover their advance, Marine artillery returns fire with 140 artillery pieces and 9 multiple launch rocket artillery systems. Pairs of Marine jets bomb the enemy positions every 7.5 minutes. A deadly display of superior firepower pounds the Iraqi positions, and they very soon crumble for no US loss. In just 30 minutes, the Marines cover the 12 miles to the edge of the first minefield in Kuwait. 500 engineers will clear 6 individual tank-width lanes across the minefield. 3 M60 tanks fitted with specialist mine-clearing equipment known as combat engineer vehicles and a Mark 154 mine clearance launcher move to the head of each prospective lane. The Mark 154 launches 3 cables laced with explosive 35 yards into the minefield. The explosive cables are then detonated, thereby detonating any mines beneath to carve a line through the field. After each detonation, the 3 combat engineer vehicles use ploughs and rakes to clear and smooth the route. Within 45 minutes, the first lane will open. Expecting an Iraqi counterattack within hours, none materialises, and Marines and tanks start to stream through the lanes as they open. Meanwhile, on the left flank, 18 Corps have no minefield to contend with, and advance into Iraq. The French Daguet are the first to cross, with a brigade from 82nd Airborne. They encounter only sporadic enemy artillery fire from scattered elements of the Iraqi 45th Infantry Division, who are dispersed thinly over a wide area to defend the western flank. Coalition artillery returns fire. The American paratroopers transmit a message to their French colleagues. Side by side, French and American soldiers will write a page in history. They roll north slowly and carefully to minimise casualties. To their east, the first wave of 106 helicopters of the 101st Airborne, known as the Screaming Eagles, sweep over the border just 10 feet from the ground. They follow a trail of radio beacons dropped by a pair of Apaches and Blackhawks during the night. The 2 Apaches wait for them at the objective area and engage Iraqi anti-air forces nearby. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Cody is commanding the pair, the same pilot who commanded the flight of Apaches that attacked the radar sites on day 1 of the air war. He was also one of the first to cross the border during the ground invasion. Before cautiously moving forward, the area in front of the French advance is blasted by artillery and airstrikes. Kiowas and French Gazelles attack enemy vehicles ahead of the front line and also guide in A-10 strikes. This Vietnam-like tactic is repeated with each advance, and so progress is not the blitz-like speed that Schwarzkopf was hoping for. A nasty sandstorm and rain slows progress further. Almost immediately after engagement, encountered Iraqi forces begin to surrender. These are Saddam's weakest divisions, They're malnourished and not interested in fighting. Processing 2,000 surrendered troops slows progress even further. The French and American force continues to crawl forward. The first of the Screaming Eagles disembark from their helicopters a mile south of Objective Cobra at 8 AM. They roll 105mm howitzers out the back of the Chinooks and immediately start lobbing artillery shells at the defenders. F-16s and A-10s arrive overhead to help the Apaches hammer enemy bunkers, tanks and vehicles. Under relentless aerial bombardment, 300 Iraqis surrender just 1 hour after the first boots landed. Wave after wave of helicopters stream into Objective Cobra over the next few hours, bringing more troops, artillery, Humvees armed with wire-guided anti-tank weapons, enormous underslung rubber sacks containing a total of 1 million gallons of fuel, food, water and ammunition. The Humvees set up a defensive perimeter while the base is constructed. To the south, the French and 82nd arrive at the area of land known as Objective Rochambeau, at midday having met almost no opposition but sporadic artillery and mortar fire en route. French helicopters move in from the west and destroy 12 bunkers, 1 tank, 5 armoured personnel carriers and 8 trucks. Another pounding by artillery precedes the armoured assault on the objective, provoking another mass surrender by the defending Iraqi troops without engagement. The time is 2:30 PM and the French and Americans have moved into Iraq and taken their first objective, overwhelming all opposition immediately, accepting 3,500 surrenders and losing only 2 soldiers. Schwarzkopf is unhappy that this walkover wasn't performed fast enough, and demands that the advance on As Salman is sped up. It's a similar situation on the right flank. M60 tanks and marines are now through the first and second layer of minefields. Artillery continues to batter enemy positions, including aircraft-directed counterfire against enemy artillery pieces. A captured Iraqi colonel describes the dispositions of his remaining forces. The minefield itself claims 9 tanks, but no marines killed. On the left flank, a convoy of marine vehicles is attacked from behind by M60 tanks in a friendly fire incident. With 55 rounds fired, 2 trucks and an assault vehicle are destroyed, killing 1 marine. A strange case of luck that the tank gunnery was so poor in this case. To the east of the Marines, the Arab forces of Joint Forces Command East are also through both minefields and have also met little opposition and mass surrenders. The Iraqi forces in this area are of similarly poor quality to those facing 18 Corps, made up mostly of enforced conscripts who don't want to be there, especially given that they've been thrown into such a hopeless situation against such a superior enemy. The ease and speed of the Marines' advance presents a problem for Schwarzkopf. Even before midday on G-Day, he estimates that his right flank is 8 hours ahead of schedule. The Egyptians of Joint Forces Command North on the Marines' left and the armour of 7 Corps further west are not scheduled to cross the border until the next day, G+1. However, the speed and depth of the Marines' advance has left their left flank vulnerable to attack, or worse envelopment, by Iraqi armoured divisions just west of them. Schwarzkopf makes the bold decision to move the central assault forward to today at 3 PM, just 2 hours away and 15 hours ahead of schedule. British 1st Armoured Division rushes to join the rest of 7 Corps on the front line from their staging area 60 miles behind the line. The last-minute time change carries logistical risks, but the enemy is weaker than anticipated and the advantage needs pressing. Scout helicopters begin to move into enemy territory to spot Iraqi units. Across the front line from 7 Corps, 2 brigades of the Iraqi 26th Infantry Division have set up defensive positions in the shape of a triangle looking down a slope towards the line, with mortars and towed artillery to the rear. Similarly entrenched, the 31st, 46th and 48th Infantry Divisions lie in wait northeast of them. They occupy a system of defensive fortifications, trenches, bunkers, minefields and barbed wire known as the Saddam Line. At 2:30 PM, 30 minutes before the breach is to begin, the most ferocious artillery barrage in recent history is unleashed against Iraqi positions. 13 artillery battalions fire 11,000 rounds. Multiple launch rocket systems also open fire, launching rockets that travel to and dispense 650 bomblets over the target area. 10 batteries devastate the Iraqi lines with 650,000 bomblets. The bombardment lasts until 3 PM, and 7 Corps crosses the line into enemy territory. The 334 Abrams and 224 Bradleys of the 1st Infantry Division are the first to engage, firing fearsome volleys of rounds into the Iraqi trenches and bunker positions. For the first time, the defenders don't surrender and return fire with tanks, artillery, anti-tank guns, small arms and RPGs, albeit disorganised and inaccurate. 2nd Armoured Cavalry lead the left flank's advance and meet similar resistance deeper in Iraq. Under fire, combat engineers hastily clear lanes across the thin minefield, and vehicles of the 1st Infantry move across. On reaching the Iraqi trenches, the Bradley infantry fighting vehicles don't dismount their infantry to clear them. Instead, armoured bulldozers turn left and right and move up the edge of the trenches, using ploughs to push the piled up sand and dirt back into the trenches, filling them in. This tactic is controversial because 150 Iraqis who don't surrender are buried alive. By sunset, the 1st Infantry have broken through the Saddam Line in multiple places, capturing 550 troops for only 2 casualties. With safe lanes marked through the line, the armoured divisions begin to move up to the front, ready to begin their mighty punch into Iraq and Kuwait. While Schwarzkopf is happy with the almost unbelievable lack of casualties sustained on day 1, he is unhappy with the slow speed with which the French have advanced in the west, and 7 Corps in the centre. The rain and sandstorms have certainly slowed progress, but the common theme across the whole front is that the weak and unmotivated conscript divisions on the front line are surrendering in such high numbers that it is taking time to process them. But the invasion as a whole is still hours ahead of schedule, and most importantly, many of the coalition's armoured divisions will be across or crossing the minefields and the Saddam Line during the morning of day 2. The ground war of Desert Storm has got off to a near perfect start, but in day 2, the coalition will face motivated and armoured Iraqi opposition, including the respected Republican Guard.